I never thought I'd see bulldozers on my lawn. Not in this quiet neighborhood. Not without a single warning. But there they were, roaring like beasts, flattening everything I'd built. My garden. My fence. Even the swing my daughter used to play on. All gone. The HOA said it was necessary development. Said my land was misclassified. Said I should be grateful they were improving the community. They built 35 homes. On my property. I tried to fight it. I filed complaints. Hired lawyers. Showed them the deed with my name on it. They laughed. Told me to take it up with the board. But the board was them. So I stopped talking. Stopped pleading. And started planning. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was what lay beneath the surface. A dam. And when the time came, I opened it. Not out of rage. Not even revenge. Just clarity. You want to know what happened next? Let's just say, those 35 homes never saw it coming. For the first 5 years, it felt like paradise. My wife and I had saved for nearly a decade to buy this land. 3 acres tucked behind a quiet cul-de-sac, just outside the reach of the city's chaos. We built everything ourselves. A modest home. A vegetable garden. A small barn for our rescue animals. Even a winding trail that led down to the creek, where our kids learned to skip stones and catch frogs. Neighbors waved. Kids played. The air smelled like pine and fresh soil. We weren't part of the HOA. Our land sat just beyond its jurisdiction. Or so we thought. The trouble started with a letter. Community Expansion Proposal, Phase 1. It looked harmless. A few lines about growth, shared values, and unified development. But buried in the fine print was a map. And on that map, our land was shaded in red. I called the board. They said it was a mistake. Then came the surveyors. Then the zoning notices. Then the bulldozers. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were obstacles. And as the homes went up one after another, I realized something chilling. They didn't plan to stop. Not until everything we'd built was gone. Not until the creek ran dry. Not until we disappeared. The first fine was for unauthorized fencing. They claimed my wooden posts didn't meet community aesthetic standards. Never mind that my property wasn't part of their community. Never mind that the fence had stood for years. The second fine came 3 days later. Unapproved livestock. They meant our rescue goats. Then came the letters. Each one colder than the last. Demands for payment. Threats of legal action. Citations for noncompliance. I called. I emailed. I even drove to the HOA office. They refused to meet with me. Said I had no standing. Said the land was under review. Meanwhile, the construction continued. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of hammering and shouting. Trucks rolled in. Concrete poured. Foundations rose. They built a road through my orchard. They tore down my greenhouse. They even rerouted the creek, diverting it with gravel and piping to make room for a cul-de-sac. I watched my land disappear, inch by inch. And then they sent me a bill, $42,000, for shared infrastructure costs. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. They were charging me for destroying my own property. I tried to fight it. I hired a lawyer. He lasted 2 weeks before quitting. Said the HOA had deep ties with the county board. Said I'd be better off settling. Settling. As if this was a negotiation. As if I hadn't already lost everything. Then came the cameras. Mounted on poles. Pointed at my house. They said it was for security. I knew better. They were watching me. Waiting for me to slip. And I did. One morning, I snapped. I walked out to the construction site and stood in front of a bulldozer. The driver honked. Shouted. Threatened to call the police. I didn't move. Not until the foreman came. Not until he told me calmly that I was trespassing. On my own land. They called the sheriff. He didn't arrest me, but he warned me. said I was interfering with development, said next time there'd be charges. That night, I sat by the creek, or what was left of it. The water barely trickled now. I thought about the dam. It was old, built decades ago by the previous owner to control flooding. I'd maintained it, reinforced it, and I knew exactly how it worked. I didn't plan anything that night. Not yet. But something shifted. I stopped trying to reason, stopped trying to fight, and started watching. Every permit, every blueprint, every zoning document they filed, I studied them. I found discrepancies, illegal rerouting, unapproved grading. I filed complaints. They were ignored. So I documented everything. Photos, videos, drone footage. I built a case. Not for the courts. For the moment they'd pushed too far. And they did. One morning, I woke to find a crew digging near the dam. They said they were installing drainage. I asked who approved it. They laughed. That afternoon, I received a final notice. Eviction proceedings initiated. They were trying to remove me. From the land I owned. From the home I built. From the life they'd already shattered. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the perimeter, checked the dam, reviewed the footage, and then I waited, because the storm was coming. Heavy rain, days of it. The creek would swell. The dam would hold, unless someone tampered with it, unless someone accidentally compromised the structure. And if that happened, if the pressure built too high, well, let's just say the cul-de-sac wouldn't be so dry anymore. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It came in sheets, thick, relentless, pounding the rooftops and flooding the gutters. The creek swelled, twisting like a live wire through the valley. I watched from my porch, boots soaked, coat heavy, eyes locked on the dam. The HOA had no idea what they'd done. By rerouting the creek, by digging into the embankment, by ignoring every warning, they'd turned a stable system into a ticking bomb. And now the pressure was rising. I warned them, sent emails, filed emergency notices, even flagged the county. No one responded. They were too busy celebrating. That weekend, the HOA held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new subdivision. 35 homes, a playground, a walking trail. They called it Creekside Meadows. I stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed. The president of the HOA, Greg, gave a speech, talked about community values, shared vision, and progress. He didn't mention the land they stole, didn't mention the family they displaced, didn't mention the dam. But I did. I walked up to the podium. No mic, no invitation, just presence. Greg froze. I held up a folder. Inside, photos, permits, drone footage. Proof of illegal grading. Proof of creek diversion. Proof of structural compromise. I handed it to a reporter. Then I turned to Greg. You built your dream on a floodplain, I said. And you didn't even know it. He laughed. Nervously. Sir, I think you've made your point, he said. But I wasn't done. I pulled out one last photo. The dam. Cracked. Strained. Leaking. Greg's face drained of color. I didn't say another word. I walked away. That night, the rain intensified. The creek roared. And just after midnight, the dam broke. It wasn't an explosion. It was a release. Water surged through the valley, carving through gravel and concrete like butter. Fences snapped. Sod peeled. Foundations crumbled. Creekside Meadows became Creekside Rapids. I watched from the ridge, not with joy, not with vengeance, with clarity. They'd ignored every warning, every plea, every law, and now nature was delivering the verdict. The flood didn't just wash away homes. It exposed everything. Within hours, the footage went viral. Drone shots of water ripping through manicured lawns. Clips of Greg shouting at emergency crews. A slow-motion collapse of a playground slide, swallowed by the current. But the real damage wasn't physical. It was reputational. The HOA's documents, leaked by the reporter I handed the folder to, showed clear negligence. Unapproved rerouting. Ignored environmental warnings. Permits pushed through with forged signatures. The county launched an investigation. Greg resigned. 3 board members followed. The subdivision was declared uninhabitable. Insurance companies refused to pay out. Homeowners, those who'd bought into Creekside Meadows, filed lawsuits. Some against the HOA. Some against the county. A few even tried to sue me. They lost. Because the dam didn't fail on its own. It was tampered with. By their contractors. The forensic report proved it. And with that, the narrative shifted. I wasn't the villain. I was the warning. The man who tried to stop it. The man they didn't listen to. The man who watched it all unfold. I rebuilt slowly. The land was scarred, but not broken. The creek found its old path again. The goats returned. The swing, my daughter's swing, I rebuilt first. Not because she asked, but because it reminded me of what mattered. We planted new trees. Repaired the barn. Neighbors came by. Some apologized. Some stayed silent. But they all saw. They saw what happens when power goes unchecked. When greed overrides community. When rules become weapons. The HOA dissolved within a year. A new group formed, smaller, quieter, focused on actual support. They asked me to join. I declined. I'd had enough of boards and bylaws. I just wanted peace. And I found it. Not in revenge. Not in victory. But in resilience. Because when you've lost everything, and still choose to rebuild, there's a strength in that. A quiet, unshakable strength. And if you're watching this, wondering what to do when the system turns against you, remember this. You don't always need to fight loud. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground and let the flood speak for itself.